Good day, and welcome back to Church History. Today we are going to look at the church in Southern Africa. Lesson 7 is about the renewed European contact with Africa and how the churches in Southern Africa developed. The lesson covers the time period from 14 to 1900 AD. In the previous lesson, we saw Islam overrun North Africa and expel Christianity from the region. This effectively separated Europe from the rest of Africa. Despite this, the majority of the Southern African continent turned to Christianity. This lesson will explore how it occurred. For centuries, spices and other goods were traded between Europe and Asia, shaping their economies and cultures. However, due to the rise of Islam, the land trade routes were dominated by Muslim traders who charged high prices and made it difficult and expensive for Europeans to access them. The Ottomans, an Islamic empire, conquered Constantinople in 1453 and became the dominant force in the region by establishing a monopoly over trade. They also built a strong navy to protect their trade routes. Due to the Islamic control of the trade, Europeans sought to reach the east by sea rather than the dangerous overland routes. The exploration of the African coast by Europeans transformed the appearance of the African continent, and by establishing Christianity on the other side of the Sahara, they hindered the spread of Islam throughout Africa. Four main European powers endeavored to explore the African continent and establish missionary stations. Portugal and France were Catholic, while the Netherlands and Britain were Protestant. The first European nation to explore the sea route was Portugal. Prince Henry the Navigator was a pivotal figure in the early Portuguese exploration of Africa. Henry was born in 1394, and he developed a passion for exploration, the arts of navigation, map-making, and shipbuilding. He did not only establish a school of navigation, but also sponsored voyages around the west coast of Africa. This insight made Portugal a leading country in the early sea trade with the East. He never saw his dream of a sea route to the East fulfilled, as he died in 1460, about 40 years before Vasco da Gama reached India by sea. Many factors contributed to Portugal's ability to lead the exploration of the sea route. Apart from being located on the Atlantic Ocean near the African continent, Portugal was also a leading country in shipbuilding and navigation at the time. According to speculation, the knowledge was passed down from the Knight Templars, who sought refuge in Portugal after being banned in the rest of Europe in 1312. The Templars were a wealthy and powerful order with a long history of seafaring and extensive knowledge in navigation, shipbuilding, and trade. They could have been the source of Prince Henry's drive and passion. The legend of Prester John was also alive in the imagination of the church. According to the legend, he was a Christian king set to rule over Christian kingdom in the east. The idea of Prester John and the lost Christian kingdom that can stand against the Muslim invasions motivated many explorations and expeditions. In the 15th century, the Portuguese was the first European nation to explore and establish a trading relation with the African Gold Coast, now known as modern-day Ghana. Along with trade, the Portuguese also brought with them the Catholic faith to the region by establishing a missionary station called Elmina. A settlement in Luanda in 1575 were used as a base for missionary work throughout Angola. The Mombasa settlement in 1637 were used as a base for missionary work in East Africa. Also, along the coast of Mozambique, a number of settlements were created. In the 17th and 18th century, Dutch exploration became dominant. Their desire to create trade networks between the East and Europe resulted in the founding of a trading post called Cape Town at the south point of Africa in 1652. The descendant of the Dutch became known as the Afrikaners. As the Afrikaner trekked further into Africa, the Dutch Reformed Church grew in prominence. To extend its beliefs and influence among the local populace, They built schools and churches. Aided by the Moravian missionaries, all of the Khoi tribes converted over time to Christianity. In the late 19th and early 20th century, driven by a desire to develop a trade network and control the production and distribution of resources, the English set their sights on the vast and untamed continent of Africa. Except for commerce, the English also saw Africa as a ripe opportunity to spread Christianity, and they worked tirelessly to establish mission stations and religious institutions across the continent. The Church of England was at the forefront of this effort, sending missionaries to Africa with the goal of converting the local population and establishing religious institutions. During the same period, the French competed with the English to establish trade networks in Africa and also to control the production and trade of resources. Along with trade, the French aimed to spread the footprint of the Catholic Church by establishing mission stations throughout the continent. In 1856, Dr. David Livingstone visited Nyasaland, what is now known as Malawi, and inspired others to start a missionary endeavor there. This led to the University Mission to Central Africa, UMCA, sending a team of Anglican missionaries in 1860. Bishop Charles Mackenzie led the outreach to establish stations along the Zambezi River. The mission soon became involved in anti-slavery work, but after Mackenzie's death from fever, it was moved to the island of Zanzibar in 1864. However, Dr. Livingstone's encouragement also led to the establishment of the Livingstonia Mission in the north of the country, which was led by E.D. Jeong and has had a lasting impact. Another mission, the Blantyre Mission, named after Livingstone's birthplace, was established by the Church of Scotland in the south of the country in 1876. In addition to preaching the gospel, the missions opened many schools, greatly contributing to the growth of education in the country. The Dutch Reformed Church also sent Andrew Charles Murray to Malawi in 1888, and he worked in the central region where the church flourished. It then sent its African missionaries to eastern Zambia. Banda and Kahunda were two notable evangelists who brought the gospel from Malawi to Zambia. Banda was the father of Hastings Banda, the first president of Malawi, and Kahunda was the father of Kenneth Kahunda, the first president of Zambia. In the early days, Zambian pastors were trained in Malawi, providing a strong foundation for the growth of the church in Zambia. The UMCA mission that relocated to Zanzibar in 1864 sent missionaries to present-day Tanzania. There they teamed up with missionaries from Uganda to spread the gospel along the eastern shore of Lake Victoria. The Roman Catholic Church also established a presence in Tanzania and created communities for former slaves in the areas around Bagamoyo and Kilimanjaro. Christianity arrived in the inland kingdom of Uganda through Henry Stanley's expedition to explore Lake Victoria. Stanley was the same person who had previously found Dr. Livingstone in Central Africa. He spoke with the Kabaka of the Baganda Kingdom and left his assistant, Darlington Mufta, to spread Christianity. Alexander Mackay was sent by the Christian Mission Society, CMS, and had a profound impact on Uganda by translating the Bible into their local language. However, the conflict between the CMS and the Roman Catholic Mission led to persecution by the Uganda monarch, who had returned to paganism. This persecution continued until Uganda became a British protectorate in 1894. Despite these challenges, the church continued to grow, and Christianity is now deeply rooted in Uganda. Kenya's climate attracted many Europeans, including missionaries, but the coastal region was dominated by Muslims. As a result, much of the Christian work took place in the interior of the country. The CMS mission sent Ludwig Kraft, who became the first Protestant missionary in East Africa when he arrived in Mombasa in 1844. This was even before the Livingstone's encouragement to send missionaries to Malawi. He was later joined by Johannes Repman in 1846. These two not only preached the gospel, but also explored much of the area and were the first Europeans to see Mount Kenya. They set up interior mission stations and communities for freed slaves. Missionaries from the Church of Scotland arrived in the 1890s and ventured into the interior. Cameron Scott founded the African Inland Mission in 1895, which led to the establishment of the African Inland Church. Kenya also had several notable African evangelists, including David Coy, who became the first martyr in East Africa in 1883. Kenya bordered the south of Ethiopia. The establishment of the Christian Church in Kenya and other southern African countries broke the century-long isolation of Christianity in Ethiopia caused by the Muslim belt in North Africa. Maybe Ethiopia was the lost kingdom of Prester John. In summary, the spread of Islam influenced European trade with the East, leading Portugal to search for a sea route around Africa, which they eventually discovered. This was followed by other nations, such as the Dutch, the English, and the French. These countries established churches in various parts of Africa, with the Portuguese and the French being Catholic, and the Dutch and the English being Protestant. A strong Dutch community emerged in South Africa and established missionary stations in what is now known as Malawi and Zambia. Missionaries were also sent from England and Scotland to present-day Tanzania, Uganda, and Kenya. Early African evangelists were trained by these missionaries, and some of their children became leaders in their communities. This brings us to the end of Lesson 7. Thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of your day.